Hey guys, Dr. Ken Nordberg here again, and this is part 3 about avoiding sounds that make it possible for whitetails to identify you and stay away from you. Part 3 of why that big buck didn't show up at your stand site last year, and part 3 of the sound part. And there's so much on sounds. It kind of surprised myself when I started putting all this together. I said, gee, it's going to take at least 3 seminars to talk about sounds that can ruin your hunting success. That's where we are right now. I'd like to start out with this. You know, there are guys, I wouldn't say a lot, but I've had some people who claim that it's just impossible to go to a stand site in the dark without alarming all the deer around your stand site, chasing them away before it gets light enough and it's legal to shoot. And so they don't want to do such a thing. And when I hear somebody say that, I'm thinking, well, it's too bad because they don't know how to do it. But then on the other hand, I have to admit, it doesn't work every time for us. My boys and I are really good at taking bucks. And sometimes, I know in my case, there's been some years where it only worked once, and I took really a nice buck. But it works almost every year. Now, most guys will only take a trophy class buck, a really nice one, put on the wall, about once or twice in a lifetime. You know, unless you don't mind putting 2.5-year-old bucks on the wall, you can do that fairly easy. But if you're going to get 10 pointers on the wall, you won't be that fortunate the way most people hunt nowadays, and way most people stand hunt nowadays, even though that's still the best way to hunt older bucks. The way we do it, each of us can take a mature buck, a nice buck, every year. And what that sometimes means, we only had one chance and we got the buck in a year. But that's outstanding when it comes to buck hunting. That's really good buck hunting. There aren't many hunters in the United States who take a mature buck every year. Not in public land in the wilds. Maybe on a guided hunt or something like that, or in a fenced area. But there aren't many people that are that fortunate to take older bucks. But we're good at it. So, no, I would, sometimes when we go out, it works the very first day, the first morning, the first minutes of legal shooting time on opening day of a hunting season. There's the big buck we were really counting on. And that's kind of fun. But sometimes I hate it, so I'm kind of stuck up there the rest of the season. And I can't, I hate getting a buck right away. And I'd much rather get it later in the hunting season and enjoy hunting, serious hunting, until that happens. And usually I get my way about that. I remember there was once, it was the last 5 minutes of a hunting season I got one. The season was over. And I said, well, I remember by this old logging trail, and it's going to be over in about 20 minutes, I might as well go back to camp. I think I'll walk in there a little bit and sit on a log or something. I got in there, sat on a log, there's one right there, and I got it. So, but the way we hunt, that's not uncommon. The way we hunt, our bucks stay in their ranges the whole season. Most of them do. Some years all of them, some years maybe a couple of them we don't see anymore. The ones that we alarmed enough so they raised their tails and ran away, they're gone for the season. And we've known some that become nocturnal right away as soon as they realize they're being hunted, and you just don't see them all season either. But usually, each one of us has got 2 or 3 bucks we're planning to hunt during the season, and so if it doesn't work out with one, then we'll start another one. But that's neither here nor there right now. But what I'm saying is it doesn't work for us every time. And there are lots of reasons why it won't work. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why a buck won't be here today, even though he was there yesterday. You know, especially while breeding's in progress, because each doe is only in heat for 24 to 26 hours during a 2-week period. And so there's different does in heat during that period. But the buck you thought you were going to get here today is over the doe a mile away in his breeding range today, and so you don't see the buck. That's one reason. But there's lots of other reasons too, including not being very good at getting to that stand site without making sounds that tell the buck, here comes a hunter. So, or what kind of a hunter? Here comes a hunter who's hunting, as opposed to, here's a hunter who's not hunting. And we've talked about that in the last 2 seminars here. But, so it doesn't work every time. But even when it doesn't work opening morning, it doesn't bug us particularly, because we can be fairly certain sometime during a coming half-day hunting, you know, and we change stand sites every half day, and I'll talk about that more in a little while. But sometime, one of those half days, we're going to get an opportunity to take a decent buck, nice buck. Sometimes more, like my son John, a couple of years ago, he got 3 during the season, and that's a little bit unusual. So that tells you it doesn't work for us every time we go out there. So I have to admit that. But that's no reason to make us stop doing what we're doing. If we started hunting the way everybody else does it, we wouldn't. You'd be lucky to have opportunity to take big bucks every year like we have been. It isn't like we have a lot of bucks in the area we hunt. You know, we're in wolf country. We're in an area where wolves have been protected for 46 years. And they've gotten to be so numerous that our deer population is now down to 3 per square mile. And that's kind of situation we're going to be hunting in this year. Only 3 deer per square mile. Can you imagine that? And I expect we're going to get some this year. So it's tough. It'd be tough under any circumstances, but we still manage to take older bucks. So even though we know we can't be successful every time we go to the stand site, we wouldn't change what we do for anything, because we're experiencing really fantastic buck hunting, doing it the way we do. Now, there are all kinds of reasons why it doesn't work. And that can be kind of hard on a guy. You know, if you're a buck hunter and you say, well, I'm not going to shoot anything smaller than a 10-pointer this year, and you're sitting out there day after day, it starts to affect me and a lot of other hunters, I'm sure, the same way. You know, you start to think maybe I'm not so good at picking buck stand sites as I think I am, because boy, here I've been out here about different stand site every half day for 5 days, and I've yet to see a decent buck, you know. And when that's going on, pretty soon you start thinking, oh geez, probably another dud of a stand site that I'm at, you know, or it should have been at a different one. And so I'll bet that one over there would have been better or something. You start thinking that way. And pretty soon you're not as alert as you should be. You know, you're just kind of sitting there relaxing and not paying as much attention to what's going on around you as you should. And pretty soon you're starting to fall asleep. You're not as alert anymore. You know, you're fighting sleep. And another thing, when you're really serious and you're really thinking about, boy, I'm going to see a buck any minute probably. You could be sitting there, especially if you're an older guy like me, and geez, your muscles are getting stiff and sore in your knees and arms, and they're just screaming for relief, and the only way you can give them relief is stand up and stretch. But normally, I don't dare do such a thing until after 11 o'clock in the morning or half hour after sundown in the evening. No matter how miserable I might be that way, I'm going to stick it out. But when you're thinking, oh, it's probably another dud, pretty soon you stand up when you shouldn't. And things can happen like that. And you kind of goof up your chance to take a big buck. And you should know about that. And I was thinking about that the other day, and I was saying, oh, I remember the last time something happened. Finally broke me out of this spell I was in about not being alert enough, not being as careful as I should be. And in fact, it was a morning I started out late. I was a half hour late getting going to a stand site a mile away. And so I was kind of in a hurry, and I was thinking, geez, I haven't seen anything for, I don't know, 5 half days of hunting, and I hope this next spot I got picked out will be good, but you know, you're not as confident when that's been going on, you know, if you have to wait for a while to see a big buck. So I was taking off, and after a little while on this trail, I tripped on a stick. I mean, I almost fell down with the gun, you know, and put my pack on my back, my stool on my back. And that stick snapped really loud, and I had to stomp around a little bit to keep my balance. It was falling down. And that was a combination of sounds I was thinking at the time, said, boy, would that scare a lot of deer if they were around me at that moment. And I didn't hear any deer running or deer snoring. I thought, well, it probably didn't bother any deer, so I just kept going, and I was kind of in a hurry anyway, and moving right along, steady, not stopping like I was supposed to be doing, things like that. And I went to a little place in the trail where I had to go between trees that are kind of close together, and to get through there without making noise, I have to turn like this and go through sideways a little bit to pass them up. And in this case, I didn't turn enough, and the wooden framework of my stool, I made it myself. I made it out of wood because I found out when you bang tubular steel, like a lot of stools that are available today are tubular metal. You bang that on a tree, you get a real loud metallic sound. Boy, every deer hears that, knows that's not another deer or a buck or a moose or something that bumped into a tree with his antler. That's a human, that metallic sound. So anyway, I did that. It was kind of loud, and I'm sure that didn't bother anybody, and I just kept going. And finally, I was getting close to my stand site, about 100 yards away, and it was starting to get light, first light. And without, all of a sudden, a grouse, it was on the trail right in front of me, and I didn't notice, and it flushed and flew. Now, you know, in November, our deer hear grouse flushing all the time. They fly up the tops of aspen trees, and they tiptoe on those branches up there in November, eating buds on aspen trees. That's their favorite food in November. So they hear this wing beat of that, but that's different wing bit. When they're just going up to do that, they don't cackle. Now, loud grouse, when you flush a grouse in the woods, or a human, they cackle, but it's not a real loud cackle. It's not like a pheasant or a ptarmigan. When they take off, that's a loud cackle, but it's a soft cackle, but it's a cackle nonetheless. And when a whitetail or other animals in the area hears a grouse flush and cackles when it goes, they know something dangerous is over there. Now, for a grouse, that might be just a weasel or a mink that made the grouse flush. So it's probably not, you know, it just will probably make deer alert. You know, is there something dangerous over there? Could be something dangerous over there. I probably don't want to go over there. So, well, when that happened, right after that happened, a red squirrel started chipping and barking. You know, they go chip, 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 bark, bark, chip, chip. And when a red squirrel does that, there is no doubt in every deer's mind, moose's mind, black bear's mind, whatever, something big is over there that's dangerous. And that, boy, they're going to stay away from that area for sure. And I knew that. And I was kicking myself, geez, I hope I didn't ruin my stand site, because I was certainly within hearing of that area. If there were deer around where my stand site is, with that buck I hoped to get there. And there was a buck that lived over there, had 4-inch tracks. He was a really nice buck. So if he heard that, I probably won't see him today. Probably wrecked that stand site. You know, I hadn't even used it before, brand new. But anyway, I kept going, and I got there, and I got into the stand site, and I thought, well, if that buck was far enough away so it didn't hear all this commotion I made on the way in there, well, at best he wouldn't show up till late in the morning, if at all. So there's other reasons why it might show up, but in that case, probably late at best. Well, about 10 o'clock, I'd come to the point where, well, I goofed it up all right. Didn't see a darn thing that whole morning. And I was saying, well, I'll stay here another hour, but before I go, but, didn't look good. And it was starting to get cold. I wear bibs that have zippers on the legs, and usually when I'm going out there, I'll have my zippers unzipped, because these quilted deb pants that I wear are really warm. So I'll have them unzipped and a couple of snaps on the bottoms to kind of keep them from flapping around when I'm walking, and I have them closed. So I was getting cold, I said, oh geez, I'm going to zip them shut, So I leaned over and zipped. And I say, well, I should have done that more slowly, because I was thinking that at that moment. And then right then, of course, something goes snort over on my right. Oh, God. And I looked over there, and there's this 10-pointer. He was there, and he's looking right at me. And I was, pretty well hidden, but he had his eyes fixed on the spot where he heard this zip. And he was looking right toward me, and he's over on this side. And geez, to get my gun around like that, I had to turn around and to get my gun up my shoulder. And before I even got halfway through doing that, he whirled and leaped through a bunch of evergreens, just like a solid screen of evergreens, leaped through there and just tore off, running full speed, crashing through brush and snorting the whole way. And I'll tell you, was I disgusted. God darn, I missed that. All these things, that zipper, I was thinking, there was all kinds of reasons why I didn't deserve to take that buck that morning. I should have started out 30 minutes earlier, and paid more attention to where my feet were coming down, and so I didn't trip on that stick and make that racket. I remember years ago, I used to carry my grunt call with me. That was a grunt call. I took 3 really nice bucks the first 3 years I had that grunt call. At close range, within 20 yards. Called the bucks up, they came real close, I got easy standing shots, and then another one, doe, trailed by a dominant breeding buck, came to the call, and I got the buck real easy shot. And great grunt call. And then, but a few times when I accidentally really cause a stick to break really loudly, I'd take that grunt call, I carried it on my neck on a lanyard, and I'd grunt once, and that way if any deer heard that, I was trying to convince them that a buck did that, not me. And I thought, oh, that was a clever thing to do. But some years later, because that grunt call wasn't working anymore, I was wondering, what's going on here? How come that's not working? And one day I was in a stand, and I was hunting on a clear cut, and I saw a buck way on the other side, walking, broadside. It was a lot of brush, and I was trying to find a hole to shoot through there, the way it was going, I'm pretty sure I knew I'm not going to see him anymore, so I grabbed my call and grunted, and he looked over in my direction. There's no way he could see me, and then bounded away. What the heck is going on here? The more I thought about it, the more I said, you know what? That buck was recognizing that grunt, and that grunt wasn't altogether normal. He recognized something different about it, and he had heard it from me, because for years, every time I went out to tree stand, if I didn't see something in a half hour, I'd grunt 1 or 2 times. So he probably heard it quite a few times, that buck, and he recognized that it wasn't real, a real buck making a sound. So now when he heard it, he said, oh, it's that hunter, and I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to stay away from this area. There he is, and he's right over there. He couldn't see me, but I heard him. That's the hunter over there. And when I came to that conclusion, I quit carrying that grunt call. So, anyway, so you can't fool them about loud snaps in the woods. The kind of creature that makes really loud snaps, breaking branches that break really loud, are humans. Hardly ever any other animal in the woods will make that, unless they're bounding. Then they might break a bunch of them. But anyway, that would have been bad. I should have been paying attention to where I was stepping. I was being careless about that. And then when I bumped my stool on a tree trunk, I should have been careful there too, but I was being careless again. I was in this spell where I was starting to think, well, where you actually think, I wonder what my odds are seeing about. It's like last year, probably another wasted half day in the woods, and you're thinking that way. And I didn't hear anything snorting or running, so I figured, oh, no damage done. And I went on, and then I flushed that grouse. And then that squirrel started making all that racket. I knew those 2 sounds. That was not something you could pass off as something harmless. I knew that could be very damaging to my hunting. These are sounds you got to avoid. And what I should have done, if I was paying attention, in fact, if I'd gone there earlier and it was still dark, I wouldn't have flushed the grouse, because the grouse wouldn't have been on the ground moving. It'd still be in a tree somewhere. And same with that squirrel. I could have went right through that whole area without any of that noise going on. But it was late now. Now they were becoming active, and so all of a sudden they had all this racket. Now if I wasn't in a hurry and I saw the grouse moving and the trail ahead of me, what I would normally do every time is stop right now and wait for that grouse to move way over to one side before I would continue down the trail. And if I had a red squirrel doing that to me up ahead there, I would detour. I'd go off to he sees me going another way, he'll settle down real quick, and I'll go around him carefully and get back to my trail and continue on. I would do that. So, but I just barged right through there, and that was bad. And then when I finally got there, then I wasn't careful about zipping, because I had concluded, oh, there's no deer around here. And I wasn't being vigilant. I mean, if I was being vigilant, there's no way a buck would have gotten up 20 feet away, or 20 yards away from me without me seeing it. I would have seen it. Oh, here comes a big one, and I could have been very careful about getting in the position to fire, but I goofed up so many ways. No way did I deserve to take that buck. Now, you have to remember too, you can make sounds well before hunting season that starts that are just as damaging. Now, every buck that lives where you hunt, that's 3.5 years of age or older, has already been successful at avoiding you. He already knows. All he needs to know, he knows what you smell like, he knows what you look like, he knows what you sound like when you walk, he knows the trails you use, he knows the tree stands you use. If you're a guy that keeps going back, same tree stand, oh, that's here he is again. Same guy, all right, I can smell him. if you, there's so many things a buck like that knows about you, and so many things he knows he can do to avoid being shot by you, it's unbelievable. You know, most guys just don't choose to believe that whitetails have a really great memory, but they do. They remember everything they know about you from year to year. I know that because I've been doing research in Texas for years. I did it for 18 years in a row, and my wife would make pets out of deer. She'd have does and their families and young bucks eating out of her hand, eating a piece of the apple or some corn. And she'd be calling. She had this nice little voice, you know, and she'd talk to them. Hi, and she'd name does, and one called Mama, and another one she called Apple. And we could go in there, and I'd back into the place where we usually camped. And while I'm getting things set up, you know, for camping there, she'd be out there right away saying, you say, Mama, or Apple, and within 15 minutes, those deer would be there in our campsite, and because they're expecting they're going to get some pieces of apple or corn from Jean. Man, they're right there. They remembered her. We'd been gone a whole year, and they remembered her voice. They remembered our vehicle, my travel trailer, everything, you know. This was a free meal. This was really fun, and she's such a nice, that's the queen of the forest there that gives us such food. And anyway, they have excellent memories. Boy, it's hard to fool a big buck who knows all these things about you. And one of the things we do is to fool them is keep moving. We change stand sites every half day, so there's nothing, every time we move to a new site, they don't know we're there. In order to survive another season, they got to know where we are. And some of them actively look for us during that period, and others don't, but they come back there because we always stand site near a site where we fully expect the deer is going to return that day. We've learned that sounds, more than anything, will make it easy for whitetails along the way and near a stand site to know you're a human and or you're a human that's hunting, which is much worse. That's the most awful thing. You don't want them to think you're hunting. You can fool them to think you're not hunting at all. You're just out for a nice walk in the woods. But we've talked about that before. Well, but so no matter what you think, there's lots of reasons why it might not work out the way you want, but there's others. There's other reasons too, that probably never think about, but it's true, and it's part of the problem because bucks have such good memories. Let's say you hunted this tree last year. Let's say you saw a big buck, maybe even got one there, and you think, oh man, I can't wait to go back there and hunt there, and dream that the same thing was going to happen. Another big buck comes along, or this year I'm going to get that thing. Or maybe last year you just found lots of tracks made by a big buck and droppings. Oh, that's a good spot. Or you scouted this year, and that tells you, boy, what a good spot this is. But let's say you went out there before the season and put a tree stand there, and you think you can put a portable stand in a tree without making any sounds? If you're going to be like another guy, you're going to probably saw off all the branches up to 6 feet above the ground, your stand platform, so you can stand up and shoot your gun or your bow. I don't know why people think they got to stand up to do that, but what a horrible motion that is. How do you can't escape being seen if you got to stand up to fire. That movement. And then you take off all the branches, and there you are, as obvious as can be, and older bucks. And say this older buck found you here last year, and he comes by, he doesn't have to even smell. You can look over there he is, sees that silhouette up there in that tree, fully exposed. It's gotcha. But make it sounds there. Let's say you made a food plot there, and like some guys, you got tractors and all kinds of things going in there, and planting, and you're mowing hay, and all this kind of thing before the hunting season. Do you believe a deer doesn't smell that? You mean to think that a buck 3.5 years of age or older, when they start hearing all this activity here, doesn't start thinking, well, that's just a farmer? When you were there last year doing the same thing and they found you guarding it, you're in this fully exposed position up in a tree, it's like you're guarding it. And, oh, there's a human there. Now, young deer, fawns or yearlings, they might not even notice you, and they'll walk out there, or younger does, maybe 2.5-year-old, and sometimes a 2.5-year-old buck can be vulnerable that way as well. But you see, those come out. But do you think those older bucks are going to be fooled this year, that they are not going to think anything's wrong there when they hear all this activity at the same site, the same tree location, or the same food plot? Or do you think those bucks are going to all of a sudden forget everything and be real vulnerable to you what the coming year? They hear all that, they're already told that, oh, it's going to be dangerous here again this year. They're already being told, stay away from this during daylight hours during the hunting season. Well, there's gunshots out there, people walking around in the woods, you don't want to be there. And so you could have another year, despite all your work, where you don't even see the big buck you were hoping to take at that site. And so you come there on a rainy day and you did everything perfect. You got there without any possibility of alarming deer along the way, and boy, you did everything just like Dr. Norberg said you should do, and you get in your stand and say, oh boy, I can't wait for light to get the light now. Versus light, no big buck, and day after day, no big buck. So that's another thing, those sounds you made before the season can set you up for having another bad season. There's other things too. You can do everything just right and still have problems. Like, for example, you can walk along that trail and you sneeze, or blow your nose, or cough. That's enough to ruin a half a day of deer hunting right there. Because no other creature in the woods makes that kind of a sound. You can't fool them into thinking that's something else that made that sound. A hunter's sneeze sounds an awful like a deer's snort. Or blowing your nose, depends on you. If I blow my nose, well, it's a noise that they never heard before. If my son John blows his nose, they think that it's a moose in heat out there. It's really a loud sound. You can't get away with sounds like that. Well, anyway, but like I say, you can do everything perfectly and still goof up. Now, for example, I remember the first buck I ever shot in my new steady hunting area near the Canadian border was a nice dominant buck with a doe in heat. And when I shot the buck, dropped in his tracks about 20 yards in front of my stand, the doe ran off about 100 yards and stood there and snorted and snorted and snorted while I was field dressing. And then when I started dragging it away, it followed me for a little way, snorting and snorting and snorting. And finally I turned around and I looked at that doe and said, that's what you get for fooling around with other bucks. She thought she was hearing another buck when I blew in my grunt call. She had to come over and investigate, and that one was following her. I said, now go find another buck and leave me alone. And she disappeared. But from that time on, for 5 years, any time that doe discovered me or identified me, sometimes it was merely my silhouette, my movement coming over a high ridge, silhouetted against a starlit sky, an hour before first light, really early. And she'd see that up there. Or sometimes when I was trying to go around her and I got upwind of her and she'd smell me, or sometimes she'd hear me over there and probably recognize my footsteps in heavy cover. She would always snort at least 24 times. It's just endless and echoing out there in this area that darn thing snorting, and boy, she was getting her revenge on me. She did it for 5 years. I had to make big, wide detours around the area to get to any stand sites beyond that area. I had to do that for 5 years. And, well, finally she became wolf food, and that ended that problem. But here's something that you can do everything perfect, but not, you know, and you walk by deer without alarm, not that one. So that can happen. Anyway, there's worse things can happen. Believe it or not. I remember one year I was going to a new stand site on a new approach trail along the edge of a pond on the wood. I was going out there in the dark with my flashlight, following my fluorescent taps as I was going along. And I come alongside this pond, and all of a sudden, whack! Really loud splash. I mean, like somebody hit the water with a great big wide paddle, just whack! And it actually splashed on me. I was getting a handful of water hit me on the right side. And holy cow! And I was thinking, I started walking more quickly, and it followed me, and it whacked the water 5 times. And it was really loud, you know, it was the quietest morning, no sound in the woods, and whack, whack. And then I finally got a little ways away from it, and it stopped, and I put my flashlight over there, and it was a beaver in the water. And boy, every deer within half mile or further knows something big and dangerous is over here, is coming this way. Put them all on alarm. And I didn't see any deer all day. I said, boy, a beaver can really ruin things. So from that time on, I learned my lesson. I never go to a stand site on a trail nearer than 30 yards of a beaver pond on the way to a stand site. Stay well away from it. So I have to be careful about that. I remember another time I was heading to a stand site, mile away, and the devil out there. And a really difficult route. I mean, up and down steep hills, and in order to stay downwind, and I had to cross a little opening, you know, but it was kind of brushy. There's elders and hazels there. And then finally get to this rocky ridge and stay low on one side of it, and then up ahead of me, my stand site was a clump of spruce trees. Nice thick clump up ahead. And I got onto this flat rock. It was a big, long stretch of flat granite rock, you know, uncovered by it. You just rock. And it was about halfway across that, and about maybe 8-10 steps from getting into those spruce trees, and all of a sudden, snort in the dark on my left. And I later learned that it was a doe, but a doe started snorting on my left. And then immediately with that, a buck, and this was definitely a buck. I didn't have to see anything to know it was a buck. It had the lowest pitched, most gurgly grunt, buck grunt I have ever heard. Just real low gurgly sound. And it started grunting over here on my right. And I immediately froze right where I was. And of course, and I didn't even dare move my head. I just stood there like a statue, hoping. And that doe on my side was snort, 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 and it was gurgle, gurgle, gurgle on my right. And then it started to get a little bit light, and then the doe started moving away and snorting, and the buck goes gurgle, gurgle, gurgle on the right, and he wasn't moving. But it seemed to me like the buck was trying to convince the doe to come back, go over where he was, and the doe was trying to convince the buck, follow me, there's something dangerous over there, you know, because the buck couldn't smell me. The wind was going the other direction, but so I come this way. Well, neither one apparently got their wish, you know. The buck eventually stopped, and when the doe stopped snorting, and she was quite a ways away, and when she finally quit, then the buck disappeared as well. I never saw him, But later I found his tracks. They were 4-inch tracks and 1-inch droppings, shiny clump droppings, and boy, that was the big one. But they took off. But of course, I didn't see any deer there anymore that day. It was a fiasco for that. But then, returning fiascos, you know, that zipper fiasco I was telling you about, seeing the buck 20 yards over here at 10 point, I wasn't going to make any more mistakes. And it would have been a big mistake to return to that site, keep coming back, hoping to get another chance at that buck. Because whenever a buck, an older buck, bounds away, going as fast as he can, whether he's snorting or not, it's almost certain that buck is in the process of abandoning his home and breeding grounds. Even if he's the dominant breeding buck, he's getting out of there. And no messing around. And he won't return. He might return at night to take care of breeding, but he won't be around there during daylight hours for the rest of the hunting season. I mean, he's gone for the hunting season. You know, just won't get another chance at him. And not only that, from that time on, he's going to think about that spot and how close he came to a human there without realizing until he heard that zip. And from that time in, for the rest of his life, he's going to treat that spot with a great deal of caution. He'll either stay well away from it, well, so if there's any human there, you know, they won't be able to see him or hear him, or he'll make it a point to travel downwind around it when passing through the area to be able to get a scent to find out if there's any human there at that site. And if there is one there, that kind of really cements it. Oh, geez, there's a human back in the same spot again the next year. So I wouldn't go back to that stand site for all the tea in China. Even though you just keep thinking, oh, I want another chance at that buck. You know, at that point, what we do nowadays, we have for quite a few years, if something like that happens, is we quit and never return to that stand site again. Maybe come back a year or so later, but theoretically, you know, a 3.5-year-old buck was going to live another 3 years. Our bucks in northern Minnesota and their winters and everything, hardly any of them survived their 7th winter. So the buck that takes his place might not have any feelings at all of danger at all concerning that clump of spruce. So later, some years later, that could be a really good spot to go. But meanwhile, as long as that buck's alive, you're not gonna get him at that stand site. So it's kind of foolish to be wasting even half a day there year after year. That would be kind of goofy. So, and then we've learned, and I've mentioned this before, that 9 times out of 10, that's a huge percentage. If we go to a stand site where we're just certain we're gonna see that buck, because everything is there. Here's a feeding area or a bedding area, or maybe a watering site in some cases. And here's lots of fresh tracks made by this big buck and droppings on this trail going there or in the area out in front here, the edge of the clear cut there, or a feeding area or an alfalfa field or whatever it is. If all those things are there and you're downwind or going to be downwind or crosswind, downwind in the morning, going from downwind, and so you can't be smelled, and you do all the things I've told you to do to get there without alarming deer along the way. You get there a half hour, sit there for a half hour, no more sounds. Then the deer that were close that might be being cautious about what they might have heard, and if you do it right, they won't be able to tell what you are by your footsteps. They'll start becoming active and start feeding, and pretty soon you see deer there. Well, so those are all the things you want to do, but 9 times out of 10, if you're close to where a big buck is going to be this morning, for all these reasons, and you don't see him, he knows you're there. He already knows you're there. You know, for years, when we had that situation. I didn't see the buck. I did research on this. Why didn't I see the buck? And usually what I would do then, when there was snow on the ground, when I got down at 11 o'clock, I'd make a big wide circle around that stand site. And 9 times out of 10, I would find the tracks of a big buck where I could see, like, if it came from downwind where it stopped, and you could see the tracks all, you know, a little patch of tracks every which way. It moved this way and it moved that way probably, and sniffing, and oh, there's a human over there. Or it was in a place where it could see where I was sitting, you know, maybe little holes through the woods, and maybe I moved, you know. I found a place where a buck like that bedded down in ferns where he could watch me where I was sitting. And as soon as he saw me move and head in his direction and leave the area, those things, or he hears something that says, yeah, it's a human over there. Yes. They don't have to smell you and see you to decide you're a human. You know, maybe I coughed or something. It's something, you know, blew my nose, cleared my throat, or something like that. There's a human over there. But somewhere around that circle, I'd find evidence that a buck did that. And then, you know, after I told you, that buck now has the book on me at that spot. And he's going to be cautious of it. And he's going to be looking for you, returning to that spot. The rest of its life, he's going to be careful about that spot. So that's not true of younger deer. You see fawns and yearlings and some 2.5-year-olds walking out, and they can come back year after year all around you when you're out there, and don't for 1 minute believe they represent the behavior of big bucks during hunting season. Big buck, that's a whole class, different class of deer. They don't make that kind of mistake, or rarely do. And if they do, they probably wouldn't be 3.5-year-olds, or 4.5, or 5.5, whatever. 5.5, they're in their prime. So that's why we move every half day. We hate thinking, oh, we were here yesterday and that buck ran away. Well, we'd be sitting there saying, there's no chance of seeing that buck here. Why waste a half day here? I should be somewhere else. And so that's what we're thinking. So we go to new stand sites every half day. We don't waste time at stand sites where we're not going to get a buck. We change. And so it's a whole new story. It's, you know, usually like that day with the zipper, I was saying, oh, I got another buck. It's about a little over a mile from here. There's a big one over there that I found while I was scouting, and there's some good spots over there to stand hunt. I'll go there. And when you go there, after a situation like that, here you're kicking yourself for making this terrible mistake, and all the time you put into it, and all, you know, everything. But then you start feeling better and better, because when you get there and you sit down at this new place, and now you're not making any mistakes, you just learned the lesson all over again. That's a terrible lesson about making mistakes. It's like opening morning all over again. Every time we move, every half day, it's like opening morning all over again. Every half day. And that's exciting. You know, and you can get into this lethargy of thinking, oh, geez, there's no bucks here, or whatever you want to believe. Something's got to be done to improve the number of bucks in this area. When all you're ever going to get in your whole life, is, unless it's fenced in, is one big buck in a square mile, and the rest are a little smaller. Some of them are pretty good, but there's one big one, the big dominant breeding buck per square mile, and that's it. And if you're not seeing it because he's outsmarted you every time, he already knows all about how to stay away from it. The way we do it, that doesn't do him any good. But he stays there because we're standing, because even if he does find us, if we're standing and just sitting there, not doing anything, we aren't chasing deer, we aren't wandering around, we aren't making drives, none of those things. He looks at us. Nothing to worry about, as long as I stay safe distance away from that spot. So that's what you're thinking. One of the things I've done, and John, my son John has learned to do, when you take a big buck, when we take a big buck, and it doesn't matter what kind of deer this, if you shot a forky or a doe or whatever, don't rush to it, because we've learned so often that I honestly believe when a deer hears a shot and they can't tell where, if there's no hunter around, don't see a hunter, hear one or smell one or anything, I think they think it's a thunderbolt. And they hear thunderbolts all summer, in the fall, kaboom out there. And so they're likely to run away, all the deer run away right away. And so what we always do when we shoot one, we drop one, we'll stay put for 15 minutes. And there's been times when we've done that, here comes another buck or other deer. But at the very least, what it does, it keeps deer from associating your shots with something dangerous. It's a human that makes a sound. You don't suddenly become a thundermaker, somebody to worry about. And here's a dead deer you're going to. You kill that deer with your thunder. When they get that idea, then all of a sudden, all the deer that heard that were within the area, and if you ran out there right away, rushed up to that deer and said, well, there's the cause of the thunder, and this person, whatever you smell like or what look like or sound like, is very dangerous. And that makes it probably even a little harder to convince deer along the way the next time you're in the area to believe you're harmless. So we like to delay rushing out there, attaching that sound, that kaboom, with us. And by not rushing out there and waiting 10, 15 minutes, sometimes you say, oh man, look at those antlers, you can't wait to get out there and look at those antlers. It's good to wait. And we're thinking about the future. And so that next time that way all these deer haven't learned, even though you were silent in getting there. Earlier in the day thought, whoa, yeah, we don't have to worry about this guy. He's just a stand hunter. All of a sudden they learn, they do have to worry about you, because you're a thunder maker and you can kill deer with your thunder. And they never forget it. The older ones anyway. And those 3.5 to 6.5-year-old bucks, they will never forget that. So that's another thing we do. It's a good tip to keep in mind. And even if you didn't drop, maybe it ran off. Good idea to wait anyway. Give it a chance to lay down and maybe bleed out and develop shock that keeps it pinned to its bed so it doesn't run away when you finally start after it. And there it is. Might have to make a finishing shot or something like that. It's good to do no matter what. Oh, one more tip now. When it comes to teaching your deer whether you're dangerous or not. Good thing to remember. Let's say you're a buck hunter. Boy, one of the nice things about being buck hunters, you see a lot of deer more than you would see otherwise when you're sitting in a stand. And here comes a doe and a fawn, yearlings going by, things like that. Kind of adds to the fun of being a stand hunter, a buck hunter. Well, treat that doe, the does, these other antlerless deer you see are buck decoys. They're the finest decoys in the world. They smell like does, they look like does, they move like does, they make sounds like does. And nothing is more important to a buck in November when spring is going out than a doe. And even if the doe is not in heat, when they're between does and heat, this one's no longer in heat, now I'm going to go find another one. They'll check every doe that, they know, here's some does that always feed over here, I'm going to go over there, they're probably feeding there now, and they'll walk by them, Oh, I guess nobody's in heat here and go on to the next and that kind of thing. Even when they're not in heat, those attract bucks. Big bucks use other deer like radar to keep away from danger when feeding, even when there's no breeding going on. They like to follow does and their young, yearlings and fawns, and keep track of them by scent or sight or sound to determine whether there is danger around. And that's one of the ways they find to stay out of danger. Let other deer take all the chances. So never alarm a doe. You got one in front, don't do anything to make that thing all of a sudden jump and start boning away, snorting. You don't want that to happen. With that, guys, if you haven't got your book yet, get it soon. The hunting seasons are beginning. It's time to be planning your next hunts, doing the right things, finding the right stand sites. Boy, if you don't know how to find a mature buck stand site yet, boy, you're really missing out. So get your book, and you're gonna, all your life you're gonna be glad you have it. I guarantee it. I really do. The other thing is, deer hunting season starts this month. Bull hunting season. There's people hunting deer already now, whitetails. And so, if you still haven't learned what I've been teaching people to do to take mature bucks every year, don't you think it's time you learn now? Do you want to be another one of these guys that only gets one or two really big bucks for the walleye in a lifetime? Wouldn't you rather be a guy who gets a really nice mature buck every year? Well, it's time you learn those things. So get my book, The Test Edition of Whitetail Hunter's Almanac, and order that soon. And if you go to my website, Dr. Nordberg on deerhunting.com, you can even get a copy of one of my previous smaller Whitetail Hunter's Almanacs, each one covering different subjects depending on the research I was doing at the time that I wrote those books. You can get one of those free along with a tent. So that saves you $10 right there. So do that. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below there. Subscribe only takes a minute, doesn't cost you anything. It's a favor for me, and also the thumbs up button if you think you like what you heard here now. Hit that too as well. Thank you. All right, gang, I'm going to say goodbye now. I got another seminar coming up here, and we'll see you soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.